I usually don't ask this early, but if you could like the video and subscribe, it would mean a lot. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support can really help get my content out there. Thanks. Asterisk Amelia Fisher asterisk. 34. A successful architect from Berlin, known for her beauty, charm, and sharp intellect. Amelia has been married for 10 years to Marcus. Asterisk Marcus Fisher. Asterisk 36. A patient, soft-spoken lawyer who has always adored his wife. Marcus is deeply committed to his family and the life they've built together. Asterisk Luca Bianchi. Asterisk 38. An Italian entrepreneur from Milan with a magnetic personality and bold charm. Luca is passionate and adventurous, constantly pushing boundaries. It was an ordinary Thursday evening in Berlin. The chill of autumn had started creeping into the air, and the once lively city had now entered that delicate phase between summer's warmth and the biting cold of winter. Inside their spacious yet cozy apartment, Marcus Fisher sat at the dining table, his eyes focused on a stack of legal documents. The faint sound of jazz played in the background, and the aroma of dinner wafted through the open-plan kitchen. His wife, Amelia, was busy at the stove, preparing her signature pasta dish. There was something almost surreal about the normalcy of the scene. To an outsider, they looked like the picture-perfect couple, married for 10 years, successful in their respective careers, living in a stylish Berlin apartment. But there was a tension in the air, something that had been building for weeks now, although Marcus couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. He looked up from his papers and watched her. Amelia was beautiful. There was no denying that. Her long blonde hair cascaded down her back in soft waves, and her graceful movements spoke of a woman who had always been in control. Yet lately, there had been something distant about her. She'd been more distracted, more evasive, and there were moments when she seemed lost in thought, as if her mind was somewhere far away. "Is everything okay?" Marcus asked, his voice soft but concerned. Amelia froze for a moment, the question catching her off guard. She quickly regained her composure, flashing him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course," she replied, her tone too light, too rehearsed. Marcus wasn't convinced. His instincts told him something was wrong, but he wasn't the type to pry. He trusted Amelia, had trusted her implicitly for the entirety of their marriage. But tonight, something felt different. His unease was growing. Just as Marcus was about to press further, the doorbell rang. He frowned, glancing at the clock on the wall. It was unusual for them to have visitors this late, especially on a weeknight. "I'll get it," Amelia said quickly, wiping her hands on a towel and rushing toward the door before Marcus could even rise from his seat. Curiosity piqued, Marcus stood up and followed her, his eyes narrowing, as he heard the low murmur of voices. As he rounded the corner, his heart skipped a beat. Standing in the doorway was Luca Bianchi. Luca was a man Marcus knew all too well. He was Amelia's business associate from a project she had worked on in Milan a few months ago. The Italian entrepreneur was charming, charismatic, and effortlessly handsome. His dark hair was impeccably styled, and his tailored suit exuded wealth and confidence. But more than anything, it was the way Luca carried himself, like a man who was used to getting what he wanted, that made Marcus uneasy. Luca smiled, his dark eyes gleaming as he stepped into the apartment with the kind of ease that suggested he had been here before. "Marcus, good to see you," he said, his voice smooth and rich, with a heavy Italian accent. Marcus forced a smile in return, though his chest tightened with unease. "Luca," he greeted, trying to keep his tone neutral, "what brings you here?"
Before Luca could respond, Amelia stepped in, her face a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. Marcus's heart began to race. He could feel it now, the tension building to a boiling point, and he knew whatever was coming next was going to change everything. "Let's sit," Amelia suggested, gesturing toward the living room. Marcus hesitated, glancing between Amelia and Luca. The atmosphere in the room felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. Reluctantly, he followed them to the living room, sitting down on the sofa as Amelia and Luca took seats across from him. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched, becoming almost unbearable. Finally, Amelia broke it. "Marcus," she began, her voice soft but steady. "There's something you need to know. I've been seeing Luca." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, reverberating in Marcus's mind. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. Seeing Luca? What did that even mean? His stomach churned with nausea as the realization slowly dawned on him. "You mean an affair?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Amelia nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "It started during the project in Milan. I didn't mean for it to happen, Marcus, but it did." Marcus felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. He had always believed in the strength of their marriage, always trusted Amelia completely. And now, here she was, confessing to infidelity. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment, Marcus thought he might be sick. Luca, who had remained silent up until this point, finally spoke. "I love her, Marcus," he said, his voice calm and confident. "And she loves me." Marcus's eyes snapped to Luca, rage bubbling up inside him. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "Why are you even here right now?" Luca leaned forward, his expression composed. "Because Amelia doesn't want to leave you," he explained. "She loves you too, Marcus. But we have a connection, something deep and real, and I'm not going to walk away from that." Marcus stared at Luca in disbelief. "So what?" he spat. "You think you can just waltz in here and tell me you're in love with my wife and expect me to... what? Share her with you?" Amelia's face was pale, her hands trembling in her lap. "I know this is hard to understand," she whispered. "But it's true, Marcus. I love you. I don't want to leave you. But I love Luca, too. I'm torn, and I don't know what to do." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening. It felt like some twisted nightmare. He had never imagined in a million years that Amelia would betray him like this. And now she was asking him to accept it, to somehow make peace with the fact that she was in love with another man. Luca's voice cut through Marcus's swirling thoughts. "I'm not asking for your permission, Marcus," he said. "I'm telling you the truth. I want Amelia to be happy, and I believe that means having both of us in her life." Marcus's fists clenched at his sides. "So what?" he said bitterly. "You want me to share my wife with you? Is that it? You think you can just come into my life and make demands like this?" Luca remained calm, his gaze steady. "I'm offering you a choice, Marcus. You can try to hold on to her and force her to choose between us. Or we can find a way to make this work for her sake." Amelia looked up, her eyes pleading with Marcus. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "But I can't deny my feelings for Luca. I don't want to lose you, Marcus, but I can't walk away from him either." Marcus felt a wave of despair wash over him. He loved Amelia more than anything, but the thought of sharing her with another man was unbearable. How could she even ask him to consider something like this? It was insane. He stood up abruptly, needing to put some distance between himself and the two of them. "I can't believe this," he muttered, pacing the room. "This is insane." Amelia watched him with tear-filled eyes, her hands trembling in her lap. She had never seen Marcus like this before, so angry, so hurt. The guilt was suffocating her, but at the same time she couldn't deny the truth of what she felt for Luca. She loved him in a way that was different from her love for Marcus, but it was no less real. Luca, for his part, remained calm and composed. He had anticipated this reaction from Marcus, but he also believed that given time, they could find a solution that worked for everyone. "Marcus," Luca said gently, "I know this is difficult, but Amelia deserves to be happy. We both love her, and I believe we can make this work if we're willing to try." Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face them, his expression one of disbelief and betrayal. "You really think this can work?" he asked, his voice filled with
Welcome to Narrative Stories. In the enchanting world of tales and adventures, we are thrilled to have you as part of our community of story enthusiasts. Here, we delve into compelling narratives that inspire and captivate, bringing characters and plots to life. Thank you for subscribing, and I look forward to sharing many remarkable stories with you. Margaret, a frail elderly widow, entered the Grand Bank building. Its towering columns and pristine windows seemed almost to mock her modest appearance. She hesitated for a moment, taking in the imposing structure that loomed above her, but then squared her shoulders and stepped inside. The bank's marble floors and high ceilings amplified the hushed conversations and the soft clicking of computer keyboards. Margaret walked towards the customer service area, clutching a worn leather handbag to her chest. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Mr. Thornton, a banker known for his sharp suits and sharper tongue. He was sitting at his desk, chatting with a colleague, a smirk playing on his lips. Margaret took a deep breath and approached him, hoping this would be the day her troubles would end. "Excuse me, sir," Margaret began, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Thornton looked up, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. She wore a simple, well-worn dress, and her silver hair was neatly pulled back. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Act 1. Margaret's struggle. 3 minutes. Margaret's background. Margaret's mind drifted back to her life with her late husband, Harold. He had been a kind, hard-working man who ensured they lived a comfortable life. They had a modest home, filled with love and laughter. Harold had always taken care of their finances, sparing Margaret the stress of dealing with money matters. However, after his passing, she found herself in dire financial straits, relying on the inheritance Harold had assured her would secure her future. Harold had often spoken of a substantial inheritance he had arranged, but he had never shared the details. Margaret trusted his words and had come to the bank, hoping to claim what was rightfully hers. Her heart pounded as she presented her documents to Mr. Thornton, explaining her situation. "Mr. Thornton, my husband passed away recently, and he told me that our inheritance was secured with your bank," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Thornton barely glanced at the documents before looking up at her with a cold, dismissive expression. The bank visit. "Do you have any idea how many people come in here with stories like yours?" Thornton asked, his smirk growing wider. "People like you, always expecting handouts." Margaret's face flushed with embarrassment, but she refused to back down. "Please, Mr. Thornton," she implored. "My husband assured me that our future was safe with this bank. I need your help." Thornton's initial reaction was cold and dismissive. He waved her off, indicating his disinterest. Thornton leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "People like you," he repeated, shaking his head. "Always coming in here, thinking you're owed something. It's pathetic." His laughter echoed through the bank, drawing the attention of other customers and employees. Margaret felt her face burn with humiliation, but she stood her ground. Margaret's determination. "Mr. Thornton, please," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. "This inheritance is all I have left. My husband assured me it was with your bank." Thornton's response was another cruel laugh. "Sure he did," he said, leaning forward. "And I suppose he told you he was best friends with the bank's founder, too." Margaret's eyes flashed with determination. Welcome to Narrative Stories. In the enchanting world of tales and adventures, we are thrilled to have you as part of our community of story enthusiasts. Here, we delve into compelling narratives that inspire and captivate, bringing characters and plots to life. Thank you for subscribing, and I look forward to sharing many remarkable stories with you. Margaret, a frail elderly widow, entered the grand bank building. Its towering columns and pristine windows seemed almost to mock her modest appearance. She hesitated for a moment, taking in the imposing structure that loomed above her, but then squared her shoulders and stepped inside. The bank's marble floors and high ceilings amplified the hushed conversations and the soft clicking of computer keyboards. Margaret walked towards the customer service area, clutching a worn leather handbag to her chest. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Mr. Thornton, a banker known for his sharp suits and sharper tongue. He was sitting at his desk, chatting with a colleague, a smirk playing on his lips. Margaret took a deep breath and approached him, hoping this would be the day her troubles would end. "Excuse me, sir," Margaret began, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Thornton looked up, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. She wore a simple, well-worn dress, and her silver hair was neatly pulled back. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Act 1. Margaret's struggle. 2, 3 minutes. Margaret's background. Margaret's mind drifted back to her life with her late husband, Harold. He had been a kind, hard-working man who ensured they lived a comfortable life. They had a modest home, filled with love and laughter. Harold had always taken care of their finances, sparing Margaret the stress of dealing with money matters. However, after his passing, she found herself in dire financial straits, relying on the inheritance Harold had assured her would secure her future. Harold had often spoken of a substantial inheritance he had arranged, but he had never shared the details. Margaret trusted his words and had come to the bank, hoping to claim what was rightfully hers. Her heart pounded as she presented her documents to Mr. Thornton, explaining her situation. "Mr. Thornton, my husband passed away recently, and he told me that our inheritance was secured with your bank," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Thornton barely glanced at the documents before looking up at her with a cold, dismissive expression. The bank visit. "Do you have any idea how many people come in here with stories like yours?" Thornton asked, his smirk growing wider. "People like you, always expecting handouts." Margaret's face flushed with embarrassment, but she refused to back down. "Please, Mr. Thornton," she implored. "My husband assured me that our future was safe with this bank. I need your help." Thornton's initial reaction was cold and dismissive. He waved her off, indicating his disinterest. Thornton leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "People like you," he repeated, shaking his head. "Always coming in here, thinking you're owed something. It's pathetic." His laughter echoed through the bank, drawing the attention of other customers and employees. Margaret felt her face burn with humiliation, but she stood her ground. Margaret's determination. "Mr. Thornton, please," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. "This inheritance is all I have left. My husband assured me it was with your bank." Thornton's response was another cruel laugh. "Sure he did," he said, leaning forward. "And I suppose he told you he was best friends with the bank's founder, too." Margaret's eyes flashed with determination.
Some days just don't go your way. No matter what you do or say, you wish you could just hide under the covers and avoid it all. As the head of the household, you carry a weight of responsibility, even when you wish you didn't. My day started abruptly at 7 a.m. when the police woke me up to report a break-in at my bar. Rushing out, I found my car had a flat tire, adding to the frustration of only having had 4 hours of sleep. Borrowing my wife's car, I headed to the bar, only to discover most of the liquor supply stolen, with the entrance smashed in. It looks like it'll be at least 2 weeks before we can reopen. The police labeled it as a robbery, and after the insurance agent documented the damage, I boarded up the entrance, awaiting repairs. Thankfully, insurance will cover the losses until we're back in business. Around lunchtime, as I was about to hop into my wife's car to head home, I heard someone shouting, "Melody, wait!" I turned to see a man rushing towards me, only to stop abruptly when he realized his mistake. He apologized, explaining he had the wrong car, then hurried off. Later, at home, I described the encounter to my wife, Melody, but she couldn't place the man. When she asked why I had to borrow her car earlier, I explained about the break-in at the bar and my tire trouble. After a quick sandwich, I fixed my truck's burst valve stem, then made a pit stop for jeans, t-shirts, and a MAGA hat. Returning home, I found Melody's note saying she'd gone shopping. My late shifts on Fridays and Saturdays meant I often arrived home in the morning. After 12 years, I finally shaved my beard. After showering, I got ready to leave, forgetting to brush my hair, leaving my curls wild. The change was so drastic, I almost didn't recognize myself. Despite this, I decided to explore other bars in town that night. Heading out as usual, I found Melody still absent. Sneaking into the bar through the back, I changed into my new clothes and found some reading glasses to complete my transformed appearance. With a clean shave and glasses, I looked much younger, almost like a college student. Realizing my truck was too recognizable, I called a cab to take me to National Car Rental, where I opted for a white, inconspicuous Ford. Starting from the north, I worked my way through town, observing and learning. At each stop, I studied the staff, ambiance, clientele, and prices, gathering insights for when I reopened my own establishment. Often, after getting what I needed, I'd leave without finishing my beer. It was at the 7th spot, a hangout for university students by the Mississippi River, where everything changed. Walking into New City Jack, I spotted my wife, Melody, dancing carnally with another man. Anger surged through me, especially realizing he was the same man who had called out to her at lunch. It was clear she had been lying to me. Melody wore an eye-catching outfit, revealing plenty of cleavage. As a bartender, I knew appearances could be misleading. Seeking a place to observe, a guy offered me a seat for buying a table. Surprised, I accepted and ordered a double gin and tonic. They were regulars, explaining the busy weekends due to university students. Later, I casually asked about a woman in revealing attire. The redhead informed me she's Melody Corbett, often seen with her boss, Payne Richards. They're regulars, possibly more than friends, given Melody's complicated situation with her husband working out of town. Additionally, they often leave together before the last set of the band. I thanked the table, bought another round, then said goodnight. Outside, as I deflated her car tires, I was caught by a redhead named Carrie Ann, who worked with them. She revealed that everyone at the table did too. "How did you know who I was?" I asked. "I didn't. I could tell from your expression that you've been struggling to hide your feelings all night, despite trying not to. Your gaze lingered on her too often. It all clicked when I saw you tampering with her car. Your earlier questions made me wonder what her husband might do if he found out," Carrie explained. "So here I am to find out if my suspicions are correct." "You don't work on oil rigs, do you? Maybe we should talk later." "I used the white Ford Taurus in the corner labeled rental. Batya Street bar is closed after being trashed this morning," I confessed. "Melody thinks I'm still there. I used tonight to scope out the competition, visiting different bars. Take the keys. I don't want you involved if someone else catches me." "You work at Batya's on Batya? It's got a great reputation," she noted, taking the keys and leaving. Later, I joined her in the car, relieved nobody else was around. "Where to?" Carrie asked. "Somewhere private," I replied. "This is my apartment, plus I needed a ride home," Carrie grinned. It was a 20-minute drive to her modular home outside of town, where I was surprised to see another car in the driveway. "That's my car. Susan, the brunette from our group, gave me a ride. It helps fend off unwanted attention if you say you're with a friend," she explained. I texted her saying I took a cab home. It was a pristine house, barely used. She fetched us beers and we settled in for a chat. "Carrie Ann, thank you for intervening. I was at a loss," I admitted. "You made me realize I might have overreacted." "He doesn't pay. They have a monthly room at the Ramada Inn on 4th. If you follow them, you'll see them heading there after closing," Carrie Ann divulged. She arrives in jeans and a t-shirt, but leaves in dressier attire, returning a few hours later, still in jeans. "How do you know all this?" I inquired. "My brother manages there. He's on duty Wednesday through Sunday." "They've been involved for over a year," Carrie replied. "Melody told him you work on oil rigs, gone for months, implying an open relationship." Seeing my shock, she continued, "You had no clue at all?" "No, I didn't. First, I need evidence," I stated. "Second, her parents support my bar. I owe them $20,000. "I'll speak with my brother, see what he can do. Maybe they have footage or she could get a key card," Carrie suggested. "I'll see him next Friday at our parents' anniversary." We swapped contacts before I left. I wanted to witness their reaction to her flat tire, helping confirm Carrie's claims. I returned to the bar just before closing, relieved the parking lot was well lit before they turned off the lights. Minutes later, Melody and Payne emerged, holding hands and exchanging quick kisses. He unlocked her car door, but they noticed the flat tire. Checking, they found them all flat. Though I couldn't hear, their actions suggested a long-term relationship. Payne called for a tow, and within 20 minutes, a truck arrived to inflate the tires. They left for the Ramada Inn, confirming Carrie's tip. Later, Melody, with damp hair and a Macy's bag, returned home. "It's painful to realize your spouse has betrayed you." I returned the car, took a cab to retrieve my truck, and arrived home at 5 a.m., crashing on the couch. She remained oblivious to her exposed affair. Mel and I met on a double date, and her captivating eyes drew me in instantly. Despite her father's strictness, she won me over, and I visited her every weekend against my father's wishes, slowly winning him over with persistence. She pursued college while I opted for online business courses while working. By her sophomore year, she was engaged, coinciding with the bar being put up for sale the following summer. Visiting with her father, we discussed renovating the dark, outdated bar. He agreed, lending me money from his retirement fund at a 6% interest rate and assisting in the renovation. Together, we transformed it, significantly cutting labor costs. Over a decade, I reduced the loan from $200,000 to under $20,000, doubling its worth. Melody's parents urged us to start a family, but she hesitated. I realized I wasn't deemed suitable to be a father. Quickly securing a commercial loan, I paid off her father, who, in turn, returned the final payment, having profited from selling the bar's plans. With his confirmation, I cleared the bank loan, leaving only an unsecured overdraft. Repairs and alterations were underway at my bar, yet my wife remained clueless, consumed by her own world. Friday night, disguised again, I tampered with her car's exhaust and his company car's gas tank. Inside their favorite bar, they were oblivious to everything but each other, their behavior drawing attention. Carrie Ann stayed close, offering support. I discreetly bribed the bartender for a video competition, urging discretion. He inquired about my plan. Pulling out my wallet, I whispered, "For your eyes only." After verifying my ID, he grinned, eager to assist in getting back at the cheating woman. He hinted at obtaining Spanish Fly for a special after-hours party next Saturday, aligning perfectly with the bar's reopening on Thursday. Spanish Fly, a potent aphrodisiac, was often prescribed to couples struggling with fertility. That stormy night, feigning sleep, I heard Melody return home at 3 a.m., engaging in a lengthy phone call. The next morning, I rose early and, with her unlocked phone, discovered her conversations with Payne after realizing I was home. She had forgotten to erase her messages. One message caught my attention, addressed to her older sister. "Sis, I need an alibi for last night. I'm going to say I was with you." I discreetly snapped a photo with my cell phone. Later, Melody explained she had visited her siblings. On Tuesday, Carrie Ann Lasher contacted me, suggesting a meetup at the highway truck stop. Arriving, she greeted me with a warm smile, capturing my image for her contacts. Despite my new mustache and goatee, Melody remained oblivious. "Hi, Red," I greeted her, noting her happiness. "I'm Caleb," she corrected. "You'll be happy too once you see the info my brother shared. He asks you to cover his printing costs." We ordered breakfast, me opting for eggs, sausage, and bacon. Carrie choosing a cheese omelet, both with orange juice and coffee. The info revealed Melody had her own keycard to his room for over 6 months, used regularly on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. At 7 p.m., I showed Carrie the incriminating message from my wife. "What's your plan?" Carrie inquired. "Are you considering a divorce? There's a special party next Saturday for Melody and Payne. I hope to receive plenty of video evidence. It's going to be wild. Once I gather everything, I'll show it to her father to explain why she doesn't want my kids. Simultaneously, she'll be served with divorce papers in their hotel room, all caught on tape. When it's ready, email it to me, please." "Why?" Carrie questioned. "Payne's corporate car is totaled, and there's a foul odor coming from Carrie's car. I'd suggest to our company that an upset husband may be to blame." "When should it be sent?" I asked, masking my satisfaction. "It's quite poetic that she's being served at the same time," Carrie chuckled. "May I mention you?" I burst into laughter. "You can be quite an idiot," Carrie joined in. "And yes, you may use my name." "I executed it perfectly," I smirked. "I'll never spill the details." We arranged for medication through our doctor, and I discreetly switched her birth control pills with sugar pills, buying myself time. I had a stroke of bad luck the other night when someone ran a red light on my way to work, totaling my truck and causing a pileup. Rescuers had to use the jaws of life to free me, and I was taken to the hospital for a thorough checkup. Melody and her parents met me there, and after 6 hours of examination, I was released with instructions to rest for at least 2 days and avoid driving for a week. Melody stayed home to care for me, and by Saturday, I was eager to return to the bar. While getting ready, I overheard Melody making plans for a night out. I asked her to drop me off at the bar, pretending to check on the changes I had made. Sales doubled that night thanks to the new cook I had hired, and we were sold out for the evening. We began attracting lunch customers with our daily specials that complemented the bar's theme. The restaurant closed at 8 o'clock, offering pickled eggs or sausages afterward. An elderly gentleman, retired but restless, proposed a partnership, setting up his kitchen and demanding 10% of profits. His scratch-made dishes like shepherd's pie and Irish stew garnered rave reviews, necessitating new kitchen staff. Around 8:30, Carrie Ann Lazar entered with her friend Susan, looking stunning in Irish-themed attire. They sat at a table, enjoying the folk music and Irish standards. Carrie Ann's green ensemble drew attention, and I treated them to specialty drinks, saying, "Compliments of the house." "Hey, Caleb," Carrie Ann said. "Thanks for remembering our preferences. This is my friend Susan." I shook Susan's hand as she excused herself briefly. Opting for a ginger ale, I avoided drinking in my own bar, a promise I'd kept for a decade. Returning to the table, Carrie Ann shifted seats to sit beside me while Susan seemed unfazed. "Taking the seat early," Carrie Ann announced before others arrived. "Susan, Caleb is Melody's ex-husband." "Really?" Susan exclaimed. "Yeah, that's true," I confirmed. "When we first met, I was exploring the town while my bar was under renovation. Carrie caught me doing something I shouldn't have, and after a conversation, I ended up giving her a ride home. We've been friends ever since." "He had no clue about his wife's actions while he was at work," Carrie Ann explained. "That's why we're here today. I wanted to make sure he wasn't alone," she added. "Why choose this place?" Susan questioned. "It's known as a high-class spot." I chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment, though it wasn't my intention when designing it. I just wanted a nice place to bring my girlfriend." "Caleb not only built this bar, he owns it," Carrie mentioned. Carrie and I exchanged a glance at Susan's surprised expression. Soon, the place filled up, and when the team arrived, our table was packed. Carrie Ann and Susan kept me on the dance floor all night, much to the delight of my staff, who noted the unusually crowded dance floor. Surprisingly, everyone agreed the music volume was just right, loud enough to enjoy without overpowering conversation. Closing time came, and I asked Carrie Ann for a ride home, where she shared that most of the crew preferred our bar over others, as it wasn't geared towards the university singles crowd. This pleased me, as word of mouth expanded our clientele. Sunday morning, waking up to find Melody absent didn't surprise me. I spent 2 hours trying to locate her, feigning concern while calling family members, and confiding in Carrie Ann. As I was speaking with her, I received another call, this time from my father-in-law. "Hey, Dad," I greeted. "Still no word, huh?" "No, Caleb. That's why I'm calling. Mary and I decided to brunch at the Ramada Inn on 4th. Wish we hadn't. Melody's car is parked here," he revealed. "I'm stuck without my truck, Dad. Can't make it. You guys enjoy lunch. I'll catch up later," I replied, sounding concerned. My father-in-law was strict, sticking firmly to his beliefs. He saw the world in black and white, finding Anderson Cooper's truth questionable. He was surprised I lacked tattoos, but I valued self-respect. Our society, I argued, prioritized self-interest over community. We debated law and order, one side preaching responsibility, the other endorsing irresponsibility. Racist had become a political weapon, branding dissenters as enemies. I remarked, if Napoleon were alive, he'd applaud their tactics. To them and their followers, we're just a minority, too wise to adhere to their doctrines. Oppose them, and you're labeled a racist, facing molestation and attacks. Now, they infiltrate democratically governed cities, masked, imposing their brand of social justice on us. They only want to hear their beliefs echoed. Though leadership promises investigations and charges, we both know it's unlikely. Equal justice is a bygone ideal. He agreed the situation will worsen before improving. It mirrors Napoleon's rise to power, a history lesson repeating itself. It's disheartening one party reintroduces such a divisive culture. These attitudes once sparked the Civil War, raising fears of a repeat. Dad, I concluded, this is our reality now. Melody's father, if he caught her with a lover, might react violently. I informed him of her secret outings, attaching evidence. Updating Carrie, she laughed, asking what I was up to. And I said, besides smiling, not much. Want me to come get you so we can hang out? She offered. I admitted I'd love to, but felt it's best not to vanish, given their worries. It was around 6 p.m., and as I sat in the kitchen devouring pizza, a car pulled into the driveway. Peering out, I recognized Melody's dad alone. He appeared utterly defeated. Welcoming him inside, I fetched Maker's whiskey and offered him a slice of pizza on a clean plate. "Dad, it's serious. After your call, I talked to Mandy first to confirm my suspicions," he explained. "I asked the hotel's day manager to contact the night manager early. Turns out, Melody's been having an affair for over 6 months. Mandy found out and agreed to keep it quiet, thinking Melody wanted to enjoy a wild, carefree life before settling down." I feigned shock, but partly I was genuinely surprised by Mandy's honesty. As I was leaving, Melody appeared with her lover, wearing a proud grin like he'd won a prize. I was so shocked I nearly passed out. "It took both managers to pull me away," he recounted. "I came here because I figured it'd be the last place the cops would search." "Dad, I'll call Mom first to let her know you're safe. Then I'll check with the Ramada Inn manager about pressing charges," I assured him. My mother-in-law was devastated but thanked her husband for visiting me. Melody called to apologize, but her mother wasn't having it. "Your apology means nothing," she retorted. "You've caused enough trouble already." Afterward, I called Jason Lasher to settle a $5 debt. He joked about his sister reminding me. "She never forgets," he chuckled. He suggested paying him in front of her to finally put it to rest. "Why?" I inquired. "It'll save us both a lot of trouble," he replied. "She needs to learn to let go." I assured him of my intentions, explaining I'm still married and won't make any decisions until then. "I promise to be careful," I reassured him. He then informed me that the police hadn't been called and Payne agreed not to press charges, thanks to Melody's persuasion. "Thanks, Jason," I said, relieved. I shared the good news with Dad before telling Mom, seeing the relief wash over his face. "What's your plan to fix this?" he asked, visibly concerned. I took out my phone and drafted a message for Melody. Showing it to her father, it read, "Dad just informed me of everything. Congratulations, you've successfully dismantled our family in a single day. Don't return home. The Melody I knew is gone. If you choose him over us, our marriage ends now. Otherwise, it's a slow pass away over the next 6 months." I delivered it earnestly, knowing trust once broken can't be restored. "Let's end this marriage swiftly and with dignity," he declared, sending the message. Mary always said Melody married her father. This only proved her right. After pizza and drinks, we headed to Lumberland for 3-door deadbolt locks. Soon after installation, the family arrived. Mandy's parents, Jack and Mary, along with their adorable kittens. They left around 10 o'clock. I texted Carrie Ann. "Are you awake?" She promptly called back. "Are you all right? Jason called and filled me in," Carrie inquired. "Payne's got 2 black eyes and a broken nose. Your father-in-law gave him a punching before Jason intervened." I chuckled, replying, "He used to box amateur when he was younger." "I'd love to witness that," I remarked. "After the incident, he came here, lost. I learned from your brother that no charges were filed, so I updated the family. They had gathered to discuss the situation and had already left." "What about Melody?" Carrie inquired. I shared that my father-in-law had posed the same question. I mentioned sending Melody a message and asked him to read it, to which he responded, "Let's end this marriage with dignity," and sent it. "Your father-in-law spoke for you. Couldn't you forgive her and give her another chance?" Carrie questioned. "No. To him, she's shattered trust beyond repair. He sees things in black and white. She made her choice, and she'll have to live with it. Consequences be damned," I asserted. "I'm with him," I added. "He even helped me change the locks." "Any updates on last night?" Carrie Ann inquired. "Haven't had a chance to check. Been swamped," I chuckled. "But I suppose it doesn't matter now." "I'll stick to my promise. Give it until Monday night," Carrie assured. "From what I've gathered, it might surprise you." "Why's that?" I asked. "Word is the bartender at New City Jack has a history in certain types of videos," Carrie chuckled. "If that's true, it wouldn't shock me if he took advantage of the situation. Are you serious?" I queried. "Absolutely, Caleb, but back to business. When's our official first date? How about on the day Melody gets served?" I suggested with a grin. "I'll even arrange for her to be served at the office. Remember, you're sending red roses beforehand. I want to drive home the point that she's violated my standards of fidelity." Carrie remarked, "Tomorrow at work will be quite intriguing." After ending the call, I reflected on what I knew about Carrie Ann. She was around 24, unmarried and attractive, standing at about 5 feet 8 inches tall. While not extremely slender, she possessed a figure my grandfather would have deemed fit for starting a family. Despite working in the same regional office of the dental company as Melody and her lover, she wasn't part of the management team as far as I knew. She was discerning about who she let into her life, maintaining close ties with her family and inner circle, which included me. Enjoying dancing and drinking, she was sociable like me. However, Carrie, with her cautious nature, left me with more questions than answers. Her level of education seemed higher than her current position suggested, hinting at underlying complexities. As I prepared for bed, I hummed, "Hey Carrie Ann, what's the game anyone can play?" Anticipating the challenges of Monday, I arranged for my assistant to manage the bar until I resolved my personal matters. Mandy arrived with Jack's truck to assist in packing her sister's belongings. We stopped by a packing supplies store to ensure we did it properly, starting with the master bedroom. While I assembled and sealed boxes, Mandy began sorting through dresser drawers. "Caleb, I'm appalled by my sister's actions," Mandy expressed. "I never condoned it and stayed silent, hoping Melody would come to her senses. When Dad told me about your message, I broke down and confessed the truth. I've only been aware of it for a month. He took it as his own failure, believing he didn't raise her properly. I think Mom feels the same way. Mandy, I'm still grappling with my emotions. The night Melody texted you, I stumbled upon it accidentally. I was at the bar merely scouting the competition when I took that photo. My intention was to gather evidence for a confrontation. I never anticipated it would unravel like this, and I deeply regret it." "Didn't you inform her that the bar had been broken into and was closed?" she inquired. "I did, but looking back, I realized she heard but chose not to heed. I should have recognized it as her way of signaling the end of our marriage. Melody was always shielded by our father, as was I. Mandy believes I needed to experience parenthood to grasp the sacrifices he made. I strive to instill those values in my children. Melody, even from a young age, lacked a sense of right and wrong. That trait persists, and I can't say I wish I had noticed it sooner." "I often think about your parents," I admitted. "Few can claim their father-in-law as one of their closest friends." As Mandy reached her sister's carnal garments, she requested sewing scissors, which I promptly supplied before packing Melody's underwear. She cut out the lap and between the cups of the bras, perhaps sending a message to her sister. All the altered items were tossed into a box. I appreciated her gesture, as I couldn't bring myself to do it. It took us roughly 4 hours to complete half of the task. I suggested treating her to lunch before resuming, and she agreed, taking me to a new Chinese restaurant named Yumi's, offering an impressive array of food at a reasonable price. We arrived just as the lunch rush was winding down and encountered Payne on his way out, sporting 2 black eyes, a broken nose, and swollen lips. My father-in-law had certainly made an impact. "Mandy, my father did that to him," she exclaimed. "It'll take 2 months for it to heal. An eyewitness told me that your dad only hit him 3 times before they intervened." "From the looks of Payne, my dad still packs a punch," I remarked, surprising Mandy. "If they hadn't stopped him, would Payne be in the hospital?" "I'm not sure," I replied, stepping out of the car. As we approached the restaurant entrance, Payne emerged and urged Mandy to unblock Melody. "Payne, have you met my brother-in-law, Caleb?" she asked. I stepped forward, and Payne's face paled as he realized I was the one driving Melody's car. He raised his fist, preparing for a fight. "If that's how you want it, Payne, fine. Mandy will confirm you started it," I said. As soon as she agreed, I swiftly kicked him in the groin, then punched him twice. I unleashed a flurry of punches until he collapsed, then delivered a final blow to finish it. Feeling a release, I escorted Mandy inside where we were seated. I ordered unsweetened tea, and she opted for a cola. "Before we eat, did my daddy teach you those moves?" Mandy inquired. "Not exactly, but it's part of my job to handle trouble when needed," I explained. "I didn't want a fair fight. I wanted to end it quickly." As Mandy and I filled our plates, my phone rang. It was Melody, but I chose not to answer. "I think her boyfriend already gave her a call," I remarked. "Too bad he won't be giving her anything soon." Mandy burst into laughter, drawing attention. I vowed not to joke with her in public again. "That was hilarious. I almost peed myself," she chuckled. "I'm glad you didn't." "How would you explain it to Jack? I might have yelled flash flood," I teased. "Stop it," she said, laughing once more. After lunch, we resumed packing until 5 o'clock when we unloaded at Jack's storage unit. I paid the deposit and rent, leaving the keys with the owner. I texted Melody to update her. My insurer called with a low offer for my totaled truck, so I requested a replacement with similar mileage. This would cost them more in the long run. Returning home, Carrie and Susan were waiting. I introduced them to Mandy as Melody's colleagues and invited everyone inside. Mandy informed Jack of the situation, and we all relaxed with some beers. "We stopped by to check on you," Carrie said, "and to see if you'd like to join us for dinner," added Susan. "Several people had a rough day at work," she continued. "Payne was seriously injured this morning and went to the hospital this afternoon. Melody was apartment hunting during lunch. I can't say I feel sorry for any of them," Mandy replied. "We spent the day moving Melody's stuff into storage. Caleb let me pack her underwear, making it easy access for her future lovers. I notified the company via email about Payne and Melody's misconduct," Carrie Ann explained. "Attached was a picture of Payne's face after Melody's father caught them. I made it clear that office romances, especially long-term affairs, were unacceptable." "Do you hate my sister that much?" asked Mandy. "No, I dislike her behavior. I come from a family where we're responsible for our actions," Carrie replied. "If we did something good, we were praised. If we did something bad, we faced consequences. I just think they got away with it for too long." I excused myself to take a call from the bar. Later, Carrie filled me in on what I missed. "So, Carrie Ann, how long have you been in love with Caleb?" asked Mandy sincerely. "The night I met him, he discovered his wife's affair," Carrie recounted. "I saw him control his anger until he left the scene. Instead of confronting her publicly, he deflated her tires. He didn't want me involved, showing his consideration. He was prepared to face consequences alone. We talked that night. He didn't curse or humiliate her. He sought evidence to explain gently to his father-in-law why Melody didn't want children." "Caleb has always been empathetic," Mandy added. "He acts as a peacemaker in family issues, despite his own pain. You have my approval, but if you hurt him, I won't hesitate to act." "When your father found out about Melody and Payne, he came here to be with Caleb," Carrie revealed. "Did you know he sent the text that ended their marriage?" "No, I didn't. That explains why they didn't discuss our attempt to reconcile," Mandy responded. "Call Jack and the kids to meet us at the bar," I instructed. "I'm making dinner for everyone, including Susan and Carrie. Give me a moment to change." Upon returning, I found Mandy gone and Susan in the kitchen. Carrie had cleaned up, and we exchanged appreciative words. "I like your sister-in-law," Carrie remarked. "I think we'll be good friends." "She speaks highly of you too," I replied. As she embraced me, we shared a moment that hinted at what was to come. Walking hand in hand, we headed to the car, sharing smiles with Susan. Carrie took the front seat, and I sat in the back with a sense of anticipation. "Susan remarked on our slow progress," Carrie said. "We're taking small steps until we sort out this mess. I want to be a stay-at-home mom with a husband who shares my values." Arriving at Baithia's house together, Mandy's children greeted us enthusiastically. Mandy mentioned how well I connect with her daughters, often calming them down. I noted the need for more bar stools. Mandy parked the truck at her husband's store. The shepherd's pie received praise, even from older patrons. Carrie, seated next to me, shared a dessert made by the chef. Carrie tasted my drink, surprised to find it was non-boozelic. She whispered teasingly, and I responded with a promise I made to myself about not drinking before opening the bar. Tears welled in her eyes, and she looked proud. My assistant reported increased sales at the bar and over $1,000 in food sales. I paid my bill with my debit card, emphasizing the importance of honesty to my employees. "Not everyone agrees," Carrie said, "but if you think about it, it adds up." I left a 20% tip when settling the bill. Then Susan and Carrie drove me home. Opening my email, I found a video from a bartender named Jack, showcasing the events of Saturday night. It was titled Surviving University Night and featured Melody and Payne. The video included legally witnessed contracts and was now for sale on an adult site. I texted Carrie the update, noting that Melody would ensure her parents never saw it. Later, Carrie arrived, noticeably transformed. "I'm stunned," I managed to say. "Who are you, and what have you done with my Carrie Ann?" "Do you like it?" Carrie responded. "I've transformed my appearance for good." Your message allows me to explain. I've been working undercover as an investigator for the FDA within Richards Dental Supply Corporation for over 2 years, Carrie Ann revealed. They've been selling contaminated materials from China, hiding their sources through multiple companies. Most buyers unknowingly have lead in their dental products. Payne, with a history of stalking married women, poses a threat to Melody. "And then I came along and diverted your attention," I interjected. "Is Susan also an agent?" I asked. "Yes, she is. We met in college while studying accounting," Carrie explained. Before we proceed, I need you to pass the video and any related information to my FBI contact. The bartender at New City, Jack, is involved in similar activities as Melody and Payne. Your input could help dismantle their operation. We sent it jointly. I poured her a glass of white wine and grabbed a cold beer for myself. As we chatted, her phone rang. She said it was my mom. I offered her privacy, but she declined, so I put it on speakerphone. "Hi, Mom. Looks like you got my message," Carrie said, smiling. "Did you really say you were leaving the FDA?" her mom asked. "Yes, Susan and I will wrap up this week, then start our own firm," Carrie explained. "We'll testify when needed, but plan to stay local for now." "We've been urging you to settle down for years. Why now?" her mom inquired. "Mom, why did you move back home?" Carrie laughed. "Okay, Mom," Carrie said. "I met someone who's piqued my interest enough to consider settling." "Is this the Caleb you've mentioned?" asked Carrie's mother. "Mom, that's enough. Goodbye," Carrie said, ending the call. "Empty nest syndrome, right?" I joked. "Tomorrow, I have a divorce lawyer appointment. Susan and I are leaving Richards," Carrie disclosed. "The FDA is stepping in on Wednesday. They want us out before executing warrants, even though they already know where to look." Carrie left around 1 a.m. Tuesday. I sorted the rental car with the insurance company, then headed to the lawyer's office to start the divorce process. I was the first to arrive at her place that day. She asked for proof, so I recounted the entire story and let her listen to my conversation with my father-in-law. I also provided printouts from the Ramada Inn. "It would strengthen our position if she agrees to my proposed settlement," I explained. "We should arrange a meeting with her and her attorney to show them what's on this flash drive. It depicts what occurred last Saturday night with their consent. I've even forwarded the email confirming it." "What makes you certain she won't contest this?" my feminist lawyer inquired. "Take the flash drive home and watch the 2-hour video alone. I keep the business, she gets the house. No alimony," I suggested. "And if she refuses?" she pressed. "Then every family member will receive a copy anonymously," I stated, rising to leave. "Caleb," she sighed, "can you always be this ruthless?" "Only when someone's actions leave me no alternative," I responded. She made me realize the last 12 years of my life were largely wasted, I reflected. Meanwhile, Carrie and Susan resigned in person from their employer's office. Melody, the office manager, was stunned by their departure. Filling their roles would pose a challenge. Payne, visibly injured, spent the day in his office fielding calls from headquarters. Aware his position was secure due to family ties, he agreed to cover the cost of 2 company cars from his own pocket. It was made clear he must either marry the woman or terminate her employment post-divorce. After quitting my lawyers, I went to a real estate broker I knew. I wanted to find out what office buildings were for sale in the area. One of them, he thought, could be a gold mine if the new owner could find a respectable anchor. It was only 5 blocks to downtown from the Baicha store on Bedia. It was now owned by the bank I was dealing with. He said he thought the bank was getting tired of wearing it with a little facelift, interior painting, and landscaping. The 3-story building could be cleaned up quickly and attract attention. After looking him over, I agreed. We went back to his office and wrote up a proposal with a low price contingent on getting financing and inspection approval. I asked him if I could show the potential client a space that I thought would be perfect for him. He gave me the keys and told me to bring it in tomorrow around 2 in the afternoon. I texted, "Could you and Susan swing by the bar? I need to show you both something," she quickly said. "Sure." I called my father-in-law and asked if he had an hour or 2 to spare. He asked me why. I explained that I was afraid I had to sell the bar to settle the divorce case and needed to start getting ready for a fresh start. I had an office building I was considering, and I wanted his opinion. He agreed, and I picked him up. We walked through the building checking out the electrical. He pointed out a few things that the building inspector wouldn't notice but could be used as bargaining chips. He asked what they were asking for. I told him and then disclosed what I was offering. "Smart move," he said. "You can always go up, but you can't go down. Personally, I think you should go for it. You need a couple of new anchors. Do you have someone in mind?" I said. "Just 2 ladies who are starting their own accounting firm, which is now working with Melody and me since I may be forced to sell Bazia." He grinned, offering, "If you secure it, I'll assist in renovating the space to accommodate both of you. It's more spacious than your current location with ample parking. Mandy speaks highly of them. She believes they're trustworthy." "Thanks, Dad," I acknowledged. "Do you reckon Melody will stake a claim on your business in the divorce?" he inquired. "The Melody I once knew probably won't, but the one I'm divorcing likely will," I responded. She'll shift blame onto me to justify her actions. My father-in-law looked taken aback. But that's not accurate. That's not what you and I know, I asserted. Name one scenario, aside from a legal contract, where truth would influence a decision. I can't. And neither can you in divorce proceedings. It all hinges on what the judge believes. If Melody and I had kids, I'd be doomed in any court's eyes, he lamented. But it's unjust, he insisted. Dad, we share your sentiment, but we're in the minority. We still cling to notions of right and wrong. Nowadays, most only prioritize themselves. The era when society benefited collectively is long gone, I remarked. Evidence of that is the growing homelessness in California, the so-called promised land. For most, reality is what the media feeds them on a given day, and it's fleeting, I remarked. Later, at the bar, my realtor informed me that they accepted the offer but wouldn't provide financing, despite my loyalty. I began seeking financing through LendingTree.com, providing my tax returns for the past 5 years to demonstrate my commitment. Susan, Carrie, and I strolled through the vacant ground floor of the building I aimed to purchase, formerly a call center. I outlined my vision for a new bar and restaurant, then inquired about their office space requirements. We can't afford the finishing costs, Susan admitted. That's why we're seeking move-in ready options. Determined, I resolved to cover the expenses myself and develop the space as the bar gains traction. I'll know about financing by Friday. I anticipate acquiring the building below its appraised value, I assured them. Melody's dad will assist with construction, reducing expenses significantly. Why go through all this? Carrie questioned. The court might compel me to sell Baitya as part of the divorce settlement, so I'm planning ahead, I explained candidly. Draft your needs for the next 2 years, I instructed. I'll proceed from there. Susan raised another possibility. What if you don't need to sell the bar? My assistant's promotion and my surgeries necessitate contingency planning, I replied, wincing at Wednesday's pain. Melody, accompanied by her parents and the FDA, made rounds to all regional offices and headquarters. She received a copy of my divorce petition, citing infidelity. By Friday, Melody and Payne departed for Richard's headquarters, finalizing the deal. I managed to secure an additional $250,000 for remodeling. We commenced interior renovation on the ground floor, stripping it down to concrete walls and essentials. Our draftsman crafted detailed plans, incorporating an elevator shaft for 3 floors and additional plumbing for Carrie and Susan's section. Contractors installed 2 entrances, one from the street and another from the main lobby. I had to excavate concrete for a new elevator shaft and erect an interior concrete wall simultaneously. Carrie and Susan flew to Washington every Sunday, returning Friday, assisting as much as possible. Negotiations between my soon-to-be ex's lawyer and mine were futile. Fed up, I arranged a meeting between all parties, prepared for confrontation. After completing the elevator shaft, I sandblasted the building to restore its original color and refresh the red brick. The crew upgraded the flat roof, then turned to interior renovations. Her office featured restrooms, a lunchroom, a reception area, and 6 offices. Mine included public restrooms, a storage area, and a band platform with a dance floor. Contractors completed her section. Within 2 weeks, 2 more office buildings were acquired nearby. 2 were sold and converted into a new Bank of America branch. The local paper heralded neighborhood redevelopment. My meeting with my ex and her lawyer was set for Friday. The kitchen equipment arrived and was set up on the white tile floor. An oak bar counter was constructed and dark pine laminate flooring was laid. Electrical work was completed on both sides. Tables, chairs, and restaurant booths were ordered and scheduled for delivery on Monday. All of this was accomplished in less than 2 months. My real estate agent secured a long-term tenant, a legal team occupying the 2nd and 3rd floors, covering mortgage, taxes, and associated expenses. At a meeting with my attorney, Melody revealed her desire for me to embrace fatherhood. I listened to her claims, skeptically laughing at her assertion of still being on birth control when conception occurred. I proposed a DNA test to validate her claim, then instructed my attorney to reveal the contents of the stick I provided. Melody paled upon learning it had over 2 million hits, each generating $99. As legally married partners at the time, I asserted entitlement to 5% of proceeds from her one-night adventure, a marital asset. I gave her the weekend to propose a fair agreement. Otherwise, I threatened to make the contents of the disc public on Tuesday. The room fell silent. I know who the father of your child is, Melody, and his name is Payne, I stated firmly before heading for the door. You made your choice. Face the consequences and accept them. 10 minutes later, my divorce attorney called Caleb with Melody's offer. $350,000 in exchange for keeping his business and house, under the condition of silence about certain matters and relinquishing rights to the movie. "Draw up the settlement agreement," Caleb instructed, "but hold on to the funds until I'm satisfied." "When will the divorce be finalized?" Caleb inquired, eager to move forward. "I'll schedule a court date now, but it won't be legal until 30 days after the judge approves," the attorney explained. Dressed sharply, Caleb awaited Carrie and Susan's arrival at the airport with roses in hand. Red for Carrie, yellow for Susan. Their faces lit up as they saw him, and he greeted them with checks in hand, symbolizing their financial agreements. With luggage in tow, they headed to Caleb's new sedan, purchased with a cash settlement he found acceptable. "Before heading home, I want to show you your finished offices," Caleb informed them. "The rest of the building is rented by a group of lawyers." Carrie inquired about the losses incurred, to which Caleb replied with a laugh, confirming it was indeed significant. In a subsequent meeting with their lawyers, Caleb presented evidence of Melody's earnings from the video, arguing that since it was filmed during their marriage, he was entitled to 50% of the income. Carrie shed tears of relief as I explained our new situation. I would retain my business, my house, and receive an additional $350,000. She had a week to remove any furniture she wanted from the house. "What are your plans for the house?" she asked. "I'll sell it," I replied. "I don't want past memories to hinder our future." Tears of joy streamed down Carrie's face. "Susan, you're still as slow as molasses in January," Susan remarked. "It took you over 2 months to express what I knew the night we met Mandy and her family. But when you finally do, you do it right." Even Susan, typically reserved, became emotional when she saw their newly approved offices. The warm, professional space, adorned with oak and pastel colors, impressed them. "All that's left is to name the business, register it, and purchase office equipment and furniture," I said with a smile. "You ladies have a good eye for colors," Carrie said, embracing me. "I love you, finally." I nodded and kissed her, signaling an end to holding back. Later, I accompanied Susan to Carrie's house, where they both now lived. It was Carrie's first time traveling home with me. We spent hours opening up to each other and catching up. After breakfast at our favorite deli, I took her to Gerard's to look at rings. She found one she loved but hesitated at the price. I insisted on buying it, envisioning it as a future gift for our daughter's 16th birthday. Even the salesperson was moved as she processed the sale. The first person Carrie called to share the news was Susan. We agreed to meet at Baisha Restaurant on Batia at 6 o'clock. I suggested she invite her parents, eager for them to meet the man who convinced them to return home. I called Daniel, my former father-in-law, and his wife, whom I always addressed as Mom and Dad, inviting them over. They happily accepted. I shared with them that Melody and I reached a divorce agreement, set for next week. Learning that Melody and Payne had announced their engagement, yet hadn't spoken, I asked Mandy to bring the whole family. I arranged for the chef to prepare a special meal, explaining the occasion. He promised a traditional Irish lamb stew and cedar cookies, adding his own twist. The bartender was instructed to serve Irish coffee with fresh cream, except for me. Unexpectedly, a private table was reserved for us at the back of the restaurant for added privacy. Daniel and Mary, my in-laws, arrived first, allowing me to introduce Carrie to them. The surprise came when Carrie's well-known parents, Bob and Roseanne Lasher, joined us. It seemed Daniel kept them informed while at work. When Jack and Mandy arrived, their young children rushed to me, aged 4 and 3, embracing me tightly. Carrie opened her arms, and the younger ones gravitated toward her. During a lavish dinner, we shared the news that Carrie got her ring, stunning everyone with its size. Carrie explained how it happened, and my response, bringing her mother to tears and earning approval from relatives. When Carrie said it was fine for me to call them Mom and Dad, I assured them they would always be Mom and Dad to me. The exceptional food delighted us as always. When the bill came, Carrie's father insisted on covering it. Despite wanting to protest, a nudge from Carrie stopped me. After everyone left except her parents, we recounted our story in detail. Bob asked why I never drank Irish coffee. Carrie explained my policy of abstaining from booze in my own establishments to set an example for employees. Impressed, Bob joked that our restaurant was fit for his daughter and friend, then praised the office design and my principles. Daniel regarded me as the son he never had, seeing me as someone who stands firm in his values. Off the record, Daniel is the father figure I never had. Growing up in a poor household without a father, my mother raised me and my sister alone after he left before they were even married. Meeting Daniel through Melody, I found him to be tough, street smart, and unyielding, yet always principled. He taught me invaluable lessons about strength and integrity, shaping who I am today. Daniel is my father not by blood, but by choice, and I owe much of my moral compass to him. We stood in silence until the ladies returned, and then Carrie's father spoke. Expressing approval of our relationship, he welcomed me into their family, a gesture that left Carrie in shock, as he had never before approved of anyone. We spent the night together, and it was hard to see her leave. Susan and Carrie aimed to leave the FDA on good terms. I listed the house on Monday, signed the divorce agreement Wednesday, and received the trust funds. Friday, I watched the judge finalize the divorce. Melody didn't show. I picked up my assistant and showed him the new bar layout. He agreed to manage it for $75,000 a year, plus a 10% bonus based on net income. Charlie's Bar and Grill was born. 3 years later, Corbett and Sullivan accounting firm thrived, while Charlie's Bar and Grill became a local favorite. Meanwhile, Melody and Payne's marriage crumbled in court as she caught him with her best friend. Despite this, her family remained distant. The birth of our twins brought joy amid life's challenges. Carrie playfully named me during labor pains, and we proudly introduced our red-haired babies to our relatives.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Lieutenant Mitchell called our squad together early one morning in late November. Mitchell was a newly minted second lieutenant assigned to our squad, replacing a seasoned veteran. Just great. Well, he wouldn't be the first one I would have to break in. Intel had provided us with information that 3 hostages had been taken, one a young American woman by the name of Emily Thornton, by a terror outfit operating some 200 kilometers from our base. She was being held hostage for a ransom from her family. Our squad had been selected to intervene and attempt to rescue. We were taken to a site approximately 5 clicks from where they were being held. It took us about 40 minutes to make our way to the site. Lieutenant Mitchell ordered me and my spotter to take position on a small hillside, some 600 meters from the front of the building, while he and the remainder of the squad made their way to the rear. I am a sniper in the United States Marine Corps, holding the rank of gunnery sergeant. My name is Frederick Wolfgang Steiger, but go by my nickname, Rick, for obvious reasons. My spotter is Lance Corporal Thomas McMurray. We had just taken up our position when we observed 3 hostages being led from the nondescript building. They were dressed in loose-fitting orange jumpsuits, each with a cloth hood over their head. There would be executioners force them to kneel in front of them. The 3 terrors were dressed in long flowing robes from head to toe, with the only visible parts of their body being a narrow strip of their face, allowing them to see, and their hands. The tallest of the 3 terrors stood behind a kneeling hostage with a knife in his hands. I sighted my M110 recoil-operated, semi-automatic, a heavy SASR, special application scoped rifle on him. Just as he drew back his hand holding the knife, I fired. Before the 7.62 round struck him in his forehead, I had sighted and fired at the second target, and then at the third man. My spotter whispered in my ear, "Target 1 down, 2 down, 3 down." In the space of less than 1.5 seconds, 3 men lay dead in the dirt. "Where is the guy, the camera?" I asked McMurray. 20 meters to the left, he answered. I quickly found him in my 30mm scope, just as he was rising to his knees with a pistol in his hand. Before he could fire, I shot him in the back of his head. Then both of us heard sounds of flash-bang grenades followed by gunfire from the building. Lieutenant Mitchell emerged from the building and signaled the 2 of us to come down and join him. By the time we arrived at the scene, the 3 hostages had had their hoods removed, and our combat medic pharmacist, Mate William Collins, affectionately known as Doc, was treating them. As I walked up, Mitchell said to me, "Just had to shoot them in the head, didn't you, Gunny? You know how hard that makes identifying them, don't you?" "Yes, sir, I do. But you never know what kind of body armor they might be wearing under those heavy robes." "Headshots are sure kills, sir," I replied. Proving my point, I went over to one of the dead terrors and moved his clothing aside, revealing a high-tech Kevlar vest. "If I had shot him in his chest from where I was, I doubt it would have stopped him, sir." "You're right, Gunny. I should know better than to question you. We'll take some blood samples, fingerprints, and see if the forensics boys can ID them." "Oh, there is 3 more dead in the house. Appears one of them had his tool bitten off, and he bled to death. Simpson killed the other 2. We'll remain here for a while, Gunny. You and the doc transport the hostages back to base. The lieutenant had no sooner finished speaking to me when I heard the distinctive sounds of the rotors of the C-Knight helicopter as it approached. As we boarded, Doc came over and shouted in my ear. The three of them were pretty heavily drugged up to make them compliant as to what was going to happen. I've given them something to counteract what they were given. The two younger ones are not doing too well. I'll stay with them, but you'll have to handle the older one. When she begins to come out from under of the effects of what she was given, she'll be disoriented and scared. Do what you have to do to keep her calm. He instructed me. Sure enough, some 15 minutes after we took off for our flight back, she began regaining her faculties, stood up and started struggling and flailing her arms around. I managed to wrap her up in my arms and pull her down onto my lap, whispering calming words in her ear. She soon settled down, but every time I tried releasing her, she began struggling again. I had no choice but to continue holding her against my body for the remainder of the 90-minute flight back to base. Once I looked past the dirt and dried tears on her face, I saw she is a very pretty young woman. Over the next 90 minutes, I had time to reflect back on my life that had brought to this moment. I was almost 15 years old when my dad left on one of his extended business trips one morning. As he did every time he left on one of these trips, he took me aside and said to me, "Rick, be sure to take good care of your mom and sisters for me while I am gone. You are the man of the house until I come home. I will, Pop. I promise you I'll take care of them," I replied. Little did I realize then how much that promise would impact my life. My father never came back. It was the middle of winter and a severe ice storm had struck the just day before he left. The roads were still icy and his car hit a patch of black ice. Unable to regain control, he crashed into a large tree. We were told he died instantly. His life insurance was just enough to pay for his funeral and a few months of mortgage payments. Mom had a job at the local library, but it didn't pay enough to support the four of us. Her, my two younger sisters, and me. She found a part-time job, working from the time she got off at the library until 11 at night, as well as all day Saturday and Sunday. Even with that added income, we only just managed to scrape by. Working all those hours soon took a toll on her. She was always tired and fast becoming worn out. As soon as I turned 15, I got a part-time job working at the market after school and on Saturdays. I gave everything I earned to my mother. It helped, and she was able to cut back on some of the extra hours she was working. When I turned 17, I left the market and got a job on the loading dock of the local factory. I worked the night shift from when school let out to midnight. It paid a whole lot better, and with that income, Mom was finally able to quit her part-time jobs. Even with working all those hours, I still did well in school. So well that I was the valedictorian of my high school class. My guidance counselor encouraged me to take the SATs, and I had a perfect score on the mathematics portion and missed a perfect score on the verbal section of the exam by 2 points. I had offers from several universities and colleges. I soon realized that even with a full academic scholarship, we wouldn't be able to afford the incidental costs. Besides, my mom and sisters depended on my income from the loading dock at the factory to make ends meet. My sisters were still too young to get jobs, so I decided to forget college and continue working at the factory. I was bound and determined to keep the promise I made to my father. Then the economy went south and the factory was forced to close. There were no other jobs available. I decided to investigate the military. The Marine Corps appealed to me, so I enlisted. When I told my mom, she was not happy. But she reluctantly became convinced when I told her I would be getting 3 meals a day 7 days a week. All my clothing would be provided and I would have free health care as well as being able to enroll in online courses for college credit. I made arrangements to have most of my monthly pay sent home for Mom and my sisters to replace what I had been earning at the factory. I was sent to Parris Island, South Carolina, for basic training. It was tough. I kept my eyes and ears open and did what I was told without any questions or arguments. The first time we went to the rifle range, I had a ball. I had always been blessed with excellent eyesight and great eye-hand coordination, so I did real well at the range. My drill instructor was impressed with my uncanny ability to group my shots within 1/4 of an inch on any target at any range from 200 out to 400 yards using just the iron sights of the weapon. I did so well that upon completion of boot camp, I was sent to sniper school. After finishing sniper school, I had 1.5 years of additional training before I was sent overseas for my first tour of duty in Iraq. Now I was just beginning my 4th tour. Being stationed in a war zone qualified for extra hazardous duty pay. That, coupled with no income tax, made it attractive for me to keep volunteering for the additional tours. I really could use the money since my sisters were now in college, and the money I sent them really came in handy. I snapped out of my reminiscing back to the present when the woman on my lap began squirming and wiggling around. Somehow she had managed to free her arms from my bear hug, and they were now firmly wrapped around my neck, with her head nestled under my chin. When we landed, I helped her out of the aircraft into the waiting arms of the medical team that was there to meet us. She placed her hand behind my head, pulling it down to her lips, and gave me a long kiss. "Thank you for everything," she whispered in my ear before giving me another kiss. Before I could respond, Doc called to me from inside the helicopter. "Gunny, give me a hand with these two. They're still in pretty bad shape." Returning to the aircraft, I re-entered. Doc was struggling with two terrified young girls that appeared to be in their early to mid-teens. They had been severely traumatized by their ordeal and now found themselves surrounded by strangers. No wonder that they were hysterical and refusing to move. Doc picked up the older of the two, exited the helicopter, and I followed, carrying the other young girl. They were both crying and clutching at us as we walked to the medical staff. As soon as they saw the older woman, already in the vehicle, they calmed down and allowed themselves to be placed alongside of her. After they left, I retrieved my weapon and walked to my quarters. I field stripped the rifle and thoroughly cleaned it. After showering and changing into a clean set of BDUs, I walked over to the hospital. Stopping one of the medical staff, I asked if I could see Miss Thornton. A doctor heard my request and walked over to me. "Afraid not, Gunny. We ran a blood test on her to determine what she had been given. Those scumsuckers loaded her up with all kinds of crap. It'll take at least 24 hours to flush her system out before we even let the intel boys debrief her. Best guess is that you'll be able to see her in about 2 or 3 days." "Thanks, doctor. Will you tell her I came by to see her? She doesn't know my name, so just tell her I'm the guy from the helicopter." "I can do that," he responded. I woke up to find a nurse standing over me. The first words out of my mouth was to ask where was I and what day was it. "Well, it's just after 4 in the afternoon, and you were brought in yesterday morning, Tuesday, just before 11 in the morning, I was told. You have had a rough couple of days, but by all indications you're going to be just fine. Are you up to a couple of visitors?" I was asked. "I guess so," I answered. "Good afternoon, Miss Thornton. I hope you're feeling better. I'm Major Williams, and this is Captain Collins. To set your mind at ease, your parents have been notified of your rescue and safe return. I have made arrangements for you to talk with your father as soon as we are finished here. We are with military intelligence, and we have some questions for you if you're feeling well enough to answering them for us." "I guess so. What you do want to know? Why don't we start from when you were captured and taken hostage and go from there?" "Okay. After all those men broke into the facility I was working at, they went from room to room shooting anyone who resisted. When they came upon me, I was counseling 2 young girls who had been sexually abused. I heard one of them say that I was the one they were looking for. Their leader remarked that I should be worth at least $10 million. They tied and blindfolded the 3 of us. We were placed in a truck, and they drove for what seemed like hours, finally stopping at rundown 2-story building. They separated us, and I was placed in a room with who I assumed was the leader, since he was the one giving the orders. He wanted me to give him BJ, but I refused. He forced himself on me. I bit down hard. He screamed and tried to pull away from me. I just bit down harder. He began beating me on my head, but I refused to stop biting him. 2 of his men ran into the room and tried to pull me away from him. Finally, one of them punched me so hard I lost consciousness. When I regained my senses, my mouth was full of blood. I spit it out along with the large pieces of flesh and skin. One of the men came into the room, slapped me, and forced me to drink a bottle of water. After some minutes, I began to feel really funny. That's the last thing I remember until I regained my senses sometime later. I was in some sort of a helicopter and sitting on a man's lap. He had his arms wrapped tightly around me, telling me everything was going to be okay. I felt safe and secure in his arms. I nestled close to him as he continued to whisper calming words into my ear. That's pretty much all I can remember until you walked into my room. Now can you help me fill in the blanks? Major Williams told me that I had been kidnapped and held for ransom by a terror outfit faction that controlled that part of Iraq. The man who tried to force himself on me was Mohammed al-Shari, who commanded that faction. He bled to death from you biting him. I was told. His companions were so incensed by your actions that they decided you had to die. The water you were forced to drink contained a toxic mixture of drugs designed to make you unable to resist or fight for your life. Captain Collins told me that I was saved from being decapitated by a Marine sniper who shot my executioner and 3 others before they could harm me or the 2 teenage girls. Who was the man with me in the helicopter? It was the same man, Miss Thornton, Gunnery Sergeant Frederick Steiger, Major Williams interjected. What else can you tell me about him? Not much, I'm afraid, Major Williams continued. All we know is that he is very good at what he does. He is just beginning his 4th tour here. Never takes any leave to go home between tours. The men in his squad respect and like him, but it appears he has absolutely no social life. He came to see how you were doing several hours after you were brought here. The medical staff told him you weren't able to receive any visitors until they were able to flush the drugs from your system, and we had the opportunity to debrief you. I would very much like to meet him. Can you arrange it? I'll see what I can do, Captain Collins answered, leaving the room. He returned several minutes later and told me that Gunnery Sergeant Steiger was out on a mission and will be gone until tomorrow. I contacted his commanding officer with your request. He assured me that he would pass it on as soon as Sergeant Steiger returns. The following afternoon, there was a knock at my door, and a young man stepped into the room. I'm Gunnery Sergeant Steiger, he said by way of a formal introduction. I'm Emily Thornton, I replied. Please call me Emily, not Miss Thornton. Fair enough. Just call me Rick. It's what my mother and my sisters call me. This was the first time I saw him without his helmet and bulky body armor. My God, he was a real hunk. He was about 6 foot tall with dark brown hair and brown eyes. His smile lit up the room. When he spoke, his voice was deep and yet soft. After we got the, "How are you?" "I'm fine," part of the conversation out of the way, we engaged in a long discussion about ourselves. I couldn't believe how fast time had passed when an orderly came in with my dinner. Rick stood up and announced he would be going so I could eat. I implored him to stay. "Don't go, please. I can eat this cold. I would very much like to continue talking with you." He sat back down, and we continued our conversations late into the evening. I confided to him my life as a spoiled little rich girl. The only reason I was in Iraq was that my grandfather insisted that I do something to help others before coming into the trust fund he had established for me. I told Rick how much the short period of time I spent here had opened up my eyes to what was really important in life. Then he briefly recounted his life from the time his dad died up to the present. I was amazed how much he had sacrificed in order to fulfill the promise he made to his father. When he finally did leave, I gave him a thank you kiss. As soon as he left, I missed him something terrible. I never believed in the old cliché, love at first sight, until today. I wanted to love him, and I wanted him to love me, too. Then I began eating my dinner. Nothing ever tasted as good as that cold food. Late that evening, a doctor came by with the results of my latest blood test. Everything was normal. All the toxins had been flushed from my system. Thank God. The medical staff and I believe that you will be able to travel home in a couple of days. You will require an escort from Iraq to Germany. You'll also require one going on to your hometown. Why don't you call your parents tonight with the news and see what they can arrange in way of an escort for you, the doctor said as he left. Since it was after 10 in the evening, I realized with the time differential, it was just a little past 2 in the afternoon at home, and Daddy would be in his office. Making the call, I explained to him what I wanted. "Are you sure about this?" "You know I'll have to check him out before I agree," he responded. Using my pathetic, little girl voice, I said, "I don't care, Daddy. Just do it for me. Please, Daddy, please." After receiving assurances from his only child that her health was fine, Peter Thornton instructed his secretary to have George Samuelson report to him ASAP. "George, I want everything you can find out about this individual, and I want it before 9 tomorrow morning," I instructed him, handing him a slip of paper with a name written on it. "Awful short notice, boss. I can do it, but it's gonna be expensive. George, I was just about to spend $10 million in ransom money to get my daughter home. Spend whatever you have to. Just get it done." It was a little past 8 that evening when my cell phone rang. The cell phone display simply said, "Samuelson. Mr. Thornton, I'm faxing you everything I have on the name you gave me." It was a piece of cake. The guy is a real straight arrow. There is absolutely nothing adverse in his background. He is an up-and-up guy. Going into my home office, I retrieved the fax, read it over twice, and then made a telephone call. I was having breakfast in the mess hall the morning after meeting with Emily Thornton. I thought to myself about what she had told me about herself. Sure, she was a charming and engaging woman, but she was way out of my league. Better just forget about her. Yes, I was finishing my second cup of coffee. One of the privates who worked in the admin office came up to me and said, "The colonel wants to see you in his office right now, Gunny." When I showed up, I was ushered immediately into Colonel William Jacobs' office. "Have a seat, Gunny," I was instructed. Colonel Jacobs picked up a sheet of paper from his desk, read it, and then said to me, "Gunny, Ms. Emily Thornton will be released from medical care tomorrow and will be flying home. She will require an escort from here to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Once there, she will be met by someone who will escort her to Frankfurt and will accompany her on a commercial flight back to the States." "Why me, Colonel? Why was I singled out for this mission?" "I don't have that answer for you. Will you accept the assignment?" "Do I have any choice, sir?" "Afraid not, Gunny. Get your gear together. You leave tomorrow at 0930. "Yes, sir," I answered. I'll be sure to see that she gets there safely. As I stood preparing to leave, he handed me a packet. This is her passport, a couple of her credit cards, and some of her personal items, including her cell phone, we recovered from where she was kidnapped. The following morning, I met Emily at the airfield, returned her passport along, the credit cards, and the rest of her belongings to her, and we boarded. I managed to snag a window seat and the accompanying seat next to it right by the emergency exit. Settling into our seats, Emily grabbed my hand as we rolled out for takeoff. Once we were safely in the air, she loosened her seatbelt and laid her head on my shoulder. Flying on a military transport with a large group of noisy service personnel, excited to be starting on their journey home, is not conducive to any type of intimate conversation. Speaking directly into my ear, she said, "I was so nervous about going home that I didn't sleep well last night. Do you mind if I close my eyes for a bit?" I nodded my consent. Still holding my hand, she reached over with her other hand and grasped my arm. In spite of the loud talking all around us, she managed to doze off as she snuggled even closer to me. I thought to myself what it would be like if we could share moments like this forever. Then reality set in as I knew that in a few short hours she would leave, continuing on the second leg of her journey. When we arrived at the Ramstein Air Base, we deplaned and I walked with her into the terminal, where she was to meet her escort for the remainder of her trip home. Instead, we were greeted by a 2-star general. There was a change in plans. The escort scheduled to accompany her was unable to fulfill his obligation. The general handed me new orders, along with an envelope containing travel documents and instructions. Then he wished us a safe journey and left. I failed to notice the big smile on Emily's face when she heard about the change in plans. Grasping my arm, she looked up at me and said, "Looks like you are stuck with me for a few more days." "Appears so," I replied, secretly pleased by the turn of events that would allow me to continue living in my fantasy world. "I promise that I will see you safely back home." In the envelope that the general gave me were 2 train tickets for travel between Ramstein and Frankfurt. Once we arrived in Frankfurt, the instructions said to take the S-Bahn, surface rail, from the Hauptbahnhof, main railway station, to the airport. From there, we were to go to the Hilton Garden and Frankfurt Airport. The accommodations were prepaid. Then the following morning, we were to go to the Lufthansa counter in Terminal 1 to acquire our tickets and boarding passes for the flight to Boston's Logan International Airport. A car would be waiting to take Emily to her home in Marblehead, Massachusetts. Rick took my hand and led me toward the waiting train at the Ramstein station. Since it was a local, we would have to change trains twice, once in Landstuhl, and the second change at the Mannheim Hauptbahnhof. The first 2 legs of our journey went smoothly. The trains were crowded, so all we pretty much could do was gaze out the window at the German countryside. As we were walking through the Mannheim station toward the track that the Frankfurt train would depart from, a crazed man with an automatic rifle came running toward us shouting. Before I knew what was happening, Rick pushed me to the floor and threw his body on top of me. I was aware of bullets striking the pavement all around us. Then I heard additional volleys of automatic weapons firing. German security had reached the scene and killed the man. Rick rolled off of me and asked if I was okay. Before I could answer, I saw blood all over his chest. Somehow I managed to pull him to a sitting position, wrapping my arms around him and crying hysterically. "I love you," were the last words he spoke to me as his eyes closed. "No. God, no." I screamed, holding Rick's lifeless body as his blood ran down my arms. I never felt the hands that pried me away from Rick's body. A blanket was wrapped around me as I watched several men place Rick's body on a gurney and rush him away. One of the men yelled something in German that I didn't understand. Then another man helped me to my feet, and we began running to keep pace with the 2, pushing Rick to a waiting ambulance. He was alive, just barely, but alive. When we arrived at the hospital, Rick was rushed into surgery. I sat outside the operating room waiting for several hours while the doctors worked feverishly to save his life. I called my father, telling him what had happened. "I'll leave your mother for a day or 2 with a nurse, and I will be there as soon as I can to bring you home, pumpkin." "No, Daddy. Stay with Mom. She needs you more than ever now. No matter how everything turns out, I'm staying here by myself. For the first time in my life, there is someone more important than me." Before Rick was wheeled into the operating room, they gave me his personal possessions to hold. I went through his wallet and found his mother's phone number. Then I made the hardest phone call I ever made in my entire life. "Hello, Mrs. Steiger. My name is Emily Thornton. I have some very bad news about your son." I explained to her the circumstances that resulted in her son being shot. She started crying, so I gave her several moments to compose herself. As soon as she settled down, I continued telling her that her son was in surgery, but the prognosis was not encouraging. I told her to get her passport and go to the airport. I would arrange to have an airline ticket waiting there for her. When she told me she didn't have a passport, never needed one, it complicated things. This was a problem my father, even with all of his connections, could not fix. I promised her I would call her immediately with any news of a change in his condition as soon as I learned of it. 5 hours later, I called her back. Rick had come through surgery, and the doctors said the next 72 hours would be critical for his recovery. I called every few hours with updates on his condition. We soon were on a first-name basis. No more Mrs. Steiger. She was now Barbara, and I was Emily. The hours stretched into days, and the days into weeks before he was well enough to be released from the hospital. Now it was me who would be escorting him home. I secured a car and driver to take us to Frankfurt Airport. I didn't want to take the train. Too many bad memories. When we were safely on our way, I told Rick that I would take him home first, and then would make my own way home afterward. He looked at me and simply said, "No, I made you a promise that I would see you safely back to your home, and I fully intend to keep my word." When we arrived at the airport, I had the driver drop us off at the square, where the Hilton Garden Inn was located. Our original reservations had long since expired, so I had called ahead to secure new ones. I was told that there was only one room available. I had no choice but to book it. We checked in at the front desk and went up to our room. Rick opened the door for me and stepped into the room after I entered. "Oh, looks like we have a problem," he remarked. "There's only one bed. Well, I'll just sleep on the floor. It won't be the first time, or, if you prefer, I'll spend the night in the lobby." "You'll do neither, Rick. It's a king-size bed. Plenty of room for the two of us. I promise not to attack you in the middle of the night. But that's a promise I may not be able to keep," I smirked. It took all the willpower I possessed, but I was able to keep my word. Darn it. I woke early the next morning before Rick. After showering and dressing, I slipped out of the room for a few minutes and made a call to my father. I had forgotten about the time differential, and his phone rang for quite some time before he answered. After I explained I was fine and everything was okay, I said to him, "Daddy, I have a big favor to ask." I told him what I wanted. He said he would do what he could. When I re-entered the room, Rick was just getting up. "Come on, sleepyhead. We have a plane to catch." It was just a short walk from the hotel to Terminal 1 and the Lufthansa desk. I had already made arrangements for our flight back to Boston/Logan, so checking in was a snap, especially since we were flying first class. With our boarding passes in hand, we cleared the security checkpoint and proceeded to the departure gate. Not long afterward, we boarded and took our seats. Rick looked at me and with some wonder in his voice said, "Really, Emily, really? First class?" Flying home in first class with Emily just reaffirmed my earlier belief. This woman was way out of my league. I mean, 2 first-class tickets probably set her back at least $7,000. This girl spent money like there was no tomorrow. Yep, way out of my league. 8.5 hours later, we arrived in Boston. After clearing passport control and customs, we entered the arrival hall where Emily spotted someone she recognized. Taking me by the hand, she introduced me. "Rick, this George Samuelson, my dad's right-hand man. George, this is Gunnery Sergeant Frederick Steiger, the man who saved my life. Twice." George shook my hand vigorously, slapped me on the back, and said that Mr. Thornton would have accompanied him, but that Emily's mother was still recovering from surgery, and he did not want to leave her alone. He walked us out of the terminal to the short-term parking lot, and, after placing our luggage in the trunk of his car, we set off for Emily's home in Marblehead, Massachusetts. A little less than an hour later, we pulled up to a wrought iron gate that swung open, allowing us to drive up to the house. We had no sooner stopped and gotten out of the car when the front door opened and an older man rushed out of the house. Enveloping Emily in his arms, I heard him say, "Thank God you are home safely, Pumpkin. Your mother and I have been so worried about you." Releasing Emily, he grabbed me in a bear hug and exclaimed, "You must be the man who saved my daughter's life. There is no way I'll ever be able to repay you, but I will damn sure try." Taking me and Emily by the arm, he walked us into the house. Sitting in a wheelchair in the foyer with a blanket over her legs was a woman I took to be Emily's mother. As soon as Emily saw her, she broke free from her father and rushed over shouting, Mom, what are you doing out of bed? Are you okay?" George said something about another surgery. Before Emily could get another word out, her mom pulled her onto her lap, hugging and kissing her. "Calm down, Pumpkin, calm down. Yes, I have had several surgeries. The first was 2 days before you were kidnapped. It was partially successful, but it encouraged me to continue in the hopes of walking again. The second one was just about the time you were to originally come home. That is why your father was unable to go and get you. The final one happened just a few days ago. The doctors told us, looking at Emily's father, that there is no reason I won't be able to resume a full and active life in a few months." With Emily pushing her mother's wheelchair, her father took my arm, and we followed them into the sitting room. Emily proceeded to tell her parents the entire story from the time she was taken captive until we arrived in Boston. She did leave out a little of the more descriptive parts of her captivity. I don't think her mother or father could have handled the part of how Muhammad al-Shari died. When she recounted the incident at the railway station in great detail, both her mother and father had horrified looks on their faces. They interrupted her narrative to ask me how I was. Had I recovered? After reassuring them that I was well on my way to a full recovery, Emily finished her story. At that moment, a member of the household staff announced that lunch was ready. After eating, I asked Mr. Thornton if he could have George take me back to the airport as I wanted to fly home to my mother and sisters. He replied, "I am afraid George is not available right at the moment. He is running an errand for me at this time. As soon as he returns, we will see about reuniting you with your family. Let's all go back to the sitting room," Emily suggested. "We can sit by the fire for a while and relax. My wife and I have planned a party tonight to celebrate Emily's safe return. We want you to be a part of this celebration. Please say you will stay," Emily's dad implored. "I appreciate the invitation, and under any other circumstances I would say yes. But I have not seen my mom and sisters in over 3.5 years. I'm kind of anxious to get going," I said as I stood. "No, Rick. You have to stay," Emily exclaimed as she clutched my arm. That same sentiment was echoed by a voice from behind me. I turned to see my mom standing there. She rushed over, and the next several minutes were filled with hugging, kissing, and a lot of tears. I will admit a lot of those tears were mine. "However did you get here? I mean, I don't understand how did." Emily and her father arranged all of it. "I received a telephone call very early this morning from Mr. Thornton, telling me to pack enough clothes for a week and for your sisters to do the same. I had to explain that both of your sisters were taking their final exams at the university. I knew they would drop everything to come, but I also knew that they had to stay behind and finish their tests. Mr. Thornton had arranged for a car to pick me up and take me to the airport. This nice man," she continued, nodding at George, "picked me up and drove right here. We'll leave you two to catch up with each other," Peter said, escorting his wife and Emily from the room. Boy, did we ever catch up with what had happened since the last time I saw them. Mom told me both my sisters were finishing their last semester of college. They were still living at home for the time being. "Rick, I want you to stop sending money home. I don't need it anymore. I've been promoted to oversee the entire library system for the county. The job comes with a substantial bump in salary. You have made enough sacrifices in your life for me and your sisters over the years. You have more than kept your promise to your father. He was so very proud of you. But now it's time for you to think about yourself." Just then Mom's cell phone rang. It was Robin, the older of my two sisters, calling to find out where Mom was. Mom told her what had happened, and Robin was so excited, screaming and yelling for Linda to come to the phone. Mom handed me her phone, and as soon as the two of them had calmed down, I was able to tell them what had been happening. After I had finished explaining everything, I asked about their exams. They both had finished 2 of their final exams and had 3 more to take to complete the term. As we finished talking, I told them to study hard, and I would see them in a few days. Later that afternoon, Emily reminded me about the party for that evening. It was to be held at the country club and was to be a semi-formal affair. "Please wear your dress uniform for me. I want to show you off to everyone," she exclaimed, kissing me on my cheek as she skipped off. When we arrived at the club, it appeared that the party was already in full swing. Mr. Thornton, pushing his wife in her wheelchair, let us in. Emily had grasped my arm as we followed. George Samuelson escorted my mother right behind us. Holy crap, there had to be over 100 people in the room. As soon as the crowd saw us, they erupted into cheers and hand-clapping. Evidently, Emily was a very popular young woman. We were soon mobbed by well-wishers and admirers. Emily was overwhelmed by her friends. She tried her best to include me, but it was soon apparent her friends were really not interested in me. There was one guy. He was introduced to me as Quentin Reynolds, as he proceeded to shoulder me aside to embrace Emily. I thought he was a little too familiar and intimate with her. To her credit, she slipped away from his embrace and rejoined me. "Old boyfriend, ex-old boyfriend," she whispered. As he moved along, he gave me a snotty and condescending look. After the crowd of well-wishers dissipated, Emily excused herself to the ladies' room. I took the opportunity to step outside onto the patio for a breath of fresh air. Standing there, I thought to myself just how insufferable some of these people were. Many of them didn't even acknowledge my presence in spite of Emily's attempts to include me in the conversations. Standing at the edge of the patio, overlooking the darkened golf course, someone grabbed me by the arm, spun me around, getting in my face, said, "I want to speak to you, a-hole. I don't know who you think you are," with Emily falling all over herself, hanging on your arm and everything. You think just because you saved her it means something. My tax dollars pay you do that. You're nothing but an ignorant, stupid jarhead. You are not even close to being in her class. As he continued his tirade, he drew a crowd from amongst the guests. Just as I was getting ready to teach this insufferable scumsucker a lesson, Emily, her father, and George Samuelson pushed their way through the crowd. The look on Emily's face rapidly changed from shock and horror to anger. "Quentin Reynolds," she screamed furiously. "How can you say such horrible things? Get out. Get out. Leave right now." Now Peter Thornton is not a small man, but George was at least 5 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier. "Get the hell out of here right now, Quentin," Peter thundered. "George, help this piece of trash out of here." "With pleasure, boss." Then George grabbed Reynolds by his collar and the seat of his pants and frog-walked him through the assembled onlookers, throwing him out with a warning not to return. Peter Thornton quieted the crowd down and announced, "Sorry about all the commotion, folks. Now that we have removed that despicable piece of humanity, I need to explain a few things to all of you about this young man. This is more than a just celebration of Emily's safe homecoming. It is also a celebration to honor a man who has sacrificed so much in his own life for others." He then briefly recounted the story of my life from the time my dad died, right up to the time I was wounded in Germany. If this man had not been there for my daughter, she would not be alive today. My wife and I will be forever in his debt, a debt we can never adequately repay. Somewhere from the back of the assembled guests, someone began to clap. Soon everyone was clapping and cheering. It was several minutes before the crowd was quiet enough to hear him say, "My friends, please let's go back inside and resume the festivities." As we walked back inside, Peter came up and confided to me, "I hope you don't mind me telling everyone about your private life, Rick. I had George check up on you several months ago. After all, Emily is my only child. Your mother filled me in on all the gaps this afternoon. You are quite an admirable young man, Frederick Steiger. I am proud to say I know you." Several days later, I had to tell Emily that I had to go back to Iraq. I would be leaving in the morning. She was crying and holding on to me, saying, "No, no, you have to stay with me. I need you. I want you more than anything I have ever wanted in my entire life. I can have Daddy fix it so you don't have to go back." "Emily," I replied, "when I entered the Marines, I swore an oath, a solemn promise to serve and protect my country. What kind of man would I be if I went back on my word?" The next morning I left. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my entire life. My last vision of Emily was seeing her sobbing in the arms of her father. 2 years later, I awoke from another troubled night filled with the same nightmare of that tragic day 2 years ago when the love of my life left me. The spot next to me in bed was empty. I could hear sounds of my new husband, of only 1 month, in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the two of us. He soon returned carrying a tray with coffee and buttered toast. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he handed me a mug of piping hot coffee and a slice of toast. After I finished my coffee, he placed my empty mug on the night table. "Was it the same nightmare?" he asked. I nodded my head yes, but the frequency of it has dropped significantly since our wedding. "Emily, it's been 2 years now. You have got to let it go. It wasn't your fault. No one blames you. But I blame myself. If I hadn't been so selfish, it never would have happened. All I ever thought about was me, me, me. Everything I ever wanted, I got. Truth be told, I'm not unhappy about having the nightmares. They serve to remind me of just how much I could have lost. Now, I just need you to hold me." My husband got back into bed, rolled over to me, and held me tightly in his arms, whispering the same comforting words he had said the night before as he calmed me down from my nightmare. I began kissing him as my hand began caressing his naked shoulder. My fingers lingered lightly over the scars left by the 2 bullets that had struck him as he lay on top of me, protecting me that afternoon over 2 years ago. Looking into his eyes, I whispered, "I love you so very, very much, Rick. Just hold me and never let me go." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
When you find out your spouse is being unfaithful, it's like a whirlwind of emotions crashes over you. You might feel inadequate, like you weren't enough. Shame, confusion, and even a surge of anger that makes you want to scream or lash out. Honestly, I never wanted to know what that felt like firsthand. But life has a way of throwing curveballs you never see coming. My wife always joked that my impulsive buying habits would be my downfall. Turns out, she was right, but not in the way either of us ever expected. It all started innocently enough with a TV ad for a voice-activated recorder. The commercial promised long battery life, excellent audio quality, and complete satisfaction. I was sold instantly and ordered one on the spot. The charge hit my credit card within a day, but the device didn't arrive for a week. When it finally did, I tore open the box like a kid on Christmas morning. The recorder was smaller than I had expected, but I was too excited to care. I popped in the batteries and spent the next hour doing my best impressions, recording everything I could think of until the tape ran out. I couldn't wait to listen back, but as I played it, I was struck by how ridiculous I sounded. I laughed at myself at first, but then the thought hit me. Was this how everyone else had been laughing at me, too? I rewound the tape and placed it in my sock and underwear drawer where my wife would be sure not to find it. I heard her car pull into our driveway, so I threw the packaging into the garbage and was on my way to the curb with the bag in hand as she got out of her car. As I ran to help her take the groceries out of the car, she was grumbling out loud about how expensive groceries were getting these days. I just smiled and took the bags inside the house and went back out for the rest. She walked back inside with me this time, and I realized that as usual there was no kiss of greeting or any acknowledgement of me on her part. As we were packing the groceries away, I tried to tell her about my day, but from the expression on her face it was obvious she just did not give a damn. I realized at that point that my marriage really might be in trouble. I lapsed into silence, and she immediately started up about the a-holes she was working with and how underpaid she was as well. I said nothing but just kept packing. The amazing thing was that this attitude of hers had only started after St. Nancy had joined the company over a year ago. Nancy was a bright young lawyer who joined the firm of Nuts and Bolts and had immediately started trying to make a name for herself. She did it that all right, as one of the most ruthless and tenacious lawyers that you could tangle with. She was rude, obnoxious, and overbearing, and also my wife's newest best friend from day one. She was a 304 and was not afraid to let you know it. After listening to my wife whine and moan for a while, I gently reminded her that she could quit and work somewhere else or stay home if she so desired. After all, I did own the biggest contracting firm in the state, Dream Homes Inc., and we would not need the money. She was putting some canned goods into the cupboard as I spoke, but stiffened and turned slowly around. Look, Terry, I do not intend to stay at home and be a housewife while you are out gallivanting from job to job. I do not plan on staring at the walls in this house, you arrogant, overbearing a-hole. She spat at me. My eyes widened in shock as I realized what my wife had just said. I fought to keep my voice down and barely succeeded as I choked my words out. I am going to take a shower and cool off before we both say some things we regret. I turned and walked away slowly with my hands clenched into fists as the blood rushed to my head. She screeched at my retreating back. You coward! How dare you walk away from me when I am talking to you? Get back here now if you value your sex life. Now a hole if you know what is good for you. I stopped and slowly turned around and gave up on not raising my voice because she had just jumped all over my last nerve. Listen, Kathy, to every word that I am going to say. Her eyes widened in shock and disbelief when she heard me swear for the first time since she knew me. She took one step back as I started in on her. I proposed to you because I fell in love with you, and because I believed that you were the woman who I wanted to have and to hold for the rest of my life. Our marriage was great for the first 5 years, but recently you have changed into someone who I do not even wish to know. She started indignantly, but I raised my hand before she could get a word out. I am not finished yet. For the last year, you have tried your best to imitate a dead woman whenever I try to make love to you. You make it seem like a chore instead of an act of love between two married people. If you think that no sex is really a threat, then you need to realize that I knew my hand intimately before I met you, and if necessary, I will reacquaint myself. I paused and took a deep breath to control my anger before I spoke again. I am tired of being constantly put down by you, and I no longer feel welcome in my own home. You need to make up your mind about whether you are interested in making this marriage work or not, and take the necessary steps to do so. Now I am going to take a shower, and you need to make a decision now or later. It is totally up to you. When I came back down the stairs about half an hour later, my wife was sitting staring through the kitchen window. She refused to acknowledge my presence. When I got back downstairs, she walked past me and up the stairs without saying a word. I sat down in the living room and tried my best to enjoy some NBA basketball, but after a while, the TV was watching me as I stared off into space. I snapped myself out of it as I heard my wife coming down the stairs. When I looked up and saw her, I noticed immediately that she was carrying her overnight bag. She stopped in front of me and in a cold and detached voice told me, I am going over to Nancy's apartment and spend the night there, unless you wish to object. I said nothing as she turned and stormed out of the house. I walked out to the patio and tried to figure out just how I had ended up at this stage. I met Kathy about 7 years ago when I walked through the doors of her law firm to set up a trust. I had won the lottery and I wanted the money set up so that no one could touch it. I wanted to use the money to expand my contracting business, and I had some other details I wanted worked out. I had been working at a construction company about 5 years ago when my buddy Jason, who was a carpenter like me, had fallen from the roof he was working on. The company I was working for refused to even acknowledge him in any way. They refused to take liability for the accident even though they did not have any proper safety equipment in place, and if you asked about it, you were gone. Even with my testimony and his, against everyone on the site, we did not stand a chance. He recovered eventually, but the bills and being laid up really put him out a lot. Because we had both lost our jobs, we decided to start up a small contracting company together to earn money. It was tough at first, but things were now starting to even out when I won the lottery for the largest jackpot ever in the history of our state. I discussed my plans with Jason, and we both agreed that investing in our business was a good plan, but we decided that we should ensure that the money was protected from any future relationships, so he had recommended nuts and bolts to me for setting up a trust. I was on my way out after signing the papers when I bumped into Kathy, and for me it was lust at first sight. She was short, about 5 feet 4 inches tall, and every single inch was curved. She was just beautiful, and I just had to try my luck with her. She gave me a hard time at first, but after a little coaxing and a lot of flowers, she finally decided to go out with me. She was bright and very articulate, and she was a joy to talk to. There were few things that we could not discuss without her being well informed about them, except for sports and my bedroom decor. The latter she took quite a while to get to know, and it was only after I proposed marriage to her about 6 months after dating her that she became as well versed in it as me. She told me a lot about her childhood and how hard it had been growing up on the wrong side of town. She had realized from early that the only way to pull herself out of there was with an education, and she had buckled down with her schoolwork and was soon top of her class. She was very shy at school, and after her body had started to develop, she had soon captured the interest of the boys. But after a disastrous first date in which the guy had tried his best, including force to get in her pants, she had given up dating in high school. She had found after graduating that she did not have enough money to go on to college, even with a scholarship. So she had started working at the law firm as a clerk/typist and completed a paralegal course at the community college. She was immediately promoted and had been doing the job for the last 5 years until she bumped into me. She always refused to discuss her previous partners with me, but just smiled and said, "You will never lose me to any man." Her reluctance bothered me a bit at first, but I decided not to dwell on it for too long. After all, it's all in the past, right? We often discussed my development plans for the business, and she was in agreement with everything I wanted to do, even suggesting that I set up a company-owned nursery for my employees' kids. Well, I took her advice on all that, and after discussing it with Jason, we started to slowly implement our long-term goals for our company. The first thing we did was to set up full medical insurance on all employees and their families, and hired a safety engineer to cut down on any accidents on our work sites. We also set up a pension plan with contributions being voluntary and provided free independent financial advice to all employees. We also set up a credit union for staff and family members only, which allowed them low-interest borrowing. Well, needless to say, our employees were very happy, and we had very few people quit except those who were going on to further their studies. When we had started the business, our company's quote was, "You give us your money, and we will give you your dream home." Our competition had laughed at us, but after the customers started to realize that what we said was what they got, they were scrambling to keep up with us. The implementation of all these things took time, and a lot of mine at that, but I always try to be there for my wife. It took about 5 years before everything started paying off, but eventually it all came together. Strangely enough, when the business was going well, is when my home life started to deteriorate. It started for me when Nancy started spending all her free time over at our house. She and I never hit it off at all. I mean, she just rubbed me the wrong way from day one. Any argument or debate, she had to win it, and her opinion was the only one that counted. You could give her facts and statistics, but nothing could change her mind when she believed in something. She was always crying down men, and soon I never even bothered to speak to her anymore, which pissed her off even more. I just did not care. The last straw came for me one day when I was sitting on my patio trying to relax and take a nap. She and Kathy both came out and sat down beside me. I tried to ignore the both of them, but Nancy soon started up a conversation about how all men were all dogs who needed to be castrated. I waited for my wife to leap to my defense at least, but when I opened my eyes, I was surprised to see her nodding her head in agreement. I almost blew a fuse right then, but just when I was starting to get control of myself, Nancy started up again. This time she was going on and on about how me could not properly satisfy women and staring me right in the eyes as she did. Now this combined with the fact that my loving wife was there nodding her head like a Chinese mandarin while Nancy spoke set me off. I rose slowly to my feet, and holding my hand out, I pointed to the road. "Listen here, you little man-hating piece of crap. I put up with you because you are my wife's friend, but I will be damned if I am going to sit here and listen to you try to emasculate me in my own home." Her mouth drooped open as she stared at me, and she went inside to pick up her belongings and left in a huff, slamming the door as she came back through it. My wife started after her but was too late to stop her from driving off. She ran back to me and started to read me the riot act about me being so rude to her friend. I raised an eyebrow and asked her, "Where were you when she was here mouthing off to me, trying her damn best to make me uncomfortable in my own home?" She spluttered and turned on her heels and walked away. I got the silent treatment for about a week after this incident, but seeing how little effect it had on me, she started to imitate a dead woman anytime I tried to make love to her and refused any attempts at foreplay. It put me off at first, but after some research on the internet and a little experimentation with her, I became quite proficient at giving her a nice climax, which pissed her off even more. All of this happened about 6 months ago, until the argument me and Kathy had just had, which had escalated things to the point they were at now. I sighed and got up and went upstairs to our bedroom. I went immediately to pick out my new toy and try to figure out how to improve my impressions and get my mind off my problems. When I hit the play button, I nearly dropped the voice recorder in surprise as I heard my wife's voice coming through the speakers. I was debating whether or not I had a right to listen in on the conversation when I heard my wife say, "I miss you too, sweetheart." I pressed stop immediately and sat sewn on my bed immediately as my hands started to tremble. What the hell was going on here? I knew the best place to find answers were on the tape, so I gritted my teeth and pressed play. "Kathy, listen, sweetheart, I can't wait to see you tonight. I am going to munch on you until you beg me to stop. Wait a minute. I need to put you on speakerphone while I pack my bag. Don't worry about that a-hole overhearing us. The door is locked and this room is virtually soundproof once that door is closed, so he cannot hear a word we say. Hold on. Nancy, don't forget to bring our favorite toy Long John with you. I just love the way it stuffs me. Don't you love the powerful climax it gives you, honey? Wait a minute. Are you still screwing that loser, girl? Kathy, after today, no, I won't be anymore." He had the audacity to cuss me out and tell me his hand was better after I threatened to stop giving him sex. Nancy was now laughing hard. Oh hell, he did not say that. But good riddance, right? Isn't he a lousy lay anyway? Kathy, actually no. He is pretty okay after all in bed. Even though I tried the corpse routine on him, he was still able to get me to come and hard too. Nancy, well, I guess he is not so useless after all. Why did you marry him anyway though? What I mean to say is, you know that you are definitely a full-fledged lesbian. So why the charade? Kathy, because he was pretty much my meal ticket. Once I found out he won the lottery, I was hooked. Besides, the relationship I was in was pretty much dead end anyway. She was just offering great sex anyway and nothing else. I decided to marry him, save some money, go to law school and get a degree, then dump his butt. Besides, no matter how many times he makes me happy, he is still a man and I prefer women. I stopped the tape after that last tidbit because I was starting to see red. So that was why she never told me about any of her previous lovers. I tried to get up and start packing some suitcases, but when I tried to stand, my legs gave out on me, and I fell back on the bed. I lay there and cried and cursed the lie that was my life, or should I say the liar who was my wife. Eventually, I managed to pull myself together and got up and started packing my suitcases with all my clean clothes. I packed up everything that I held of value and placed it in my pickup truck. There was no way I was going to stay in a house where I would be reminded of her and what she did to me. I called my company's lawyers and asked for the most ruthless divorce lawyers they knew of. After they gave me the name and address of the firm, I drove immediately over there to get the ball rolling. I gave them the tape and explained that I wanted a no-fault divorce. Unless she fought it, then the tape should be used and her adultery brought into the light. I left the office after signing the necessary papers and went down to my truck and drove to the nearest hotel. None of my family lived close, and I was glad of that, as I had no wish for anyone to find out that I had been horned by a woman. Had it been a guy, I don't think it would have screwed me up as much emotionally. I placed my suitcases in my suite and then went back down to my van. I drove over to Jason's house and asked him to keep my stuff in his garage until I had arranged for a new residence. I gave him a brief explanation about my pending divorce, and he thankfully did not try to probe me for more information. I canceled my cell phone service and got a new one set up the next day. I explained at the office that my soon-to-be ex-wife was no longer allowed inside my office, and other than a few questioning glances, no one said a word. The divorce papers were served at her workplace, and she went into shock after receiving them. She tried calling me but got an out-of-service message on my cell phone and was told that I was not accepting her calls when she tried my office. She found out where I was staying, but after being slapped with a restraining order, she gave up on that. She and Nancy did try to fight me on the divorce and demanded a hefty settlement. My lawyers called me and I showed up at their office to meet with Kathy and Nancy, who was representing her. I watched her face as the tape was played for the both of them, and they both turned pale and slumped into their chairs simultaneously. After that, there was no fighting on their parts, and they were both eager to sign the agreement. Afterwards, when we were on our way out, Kathy did stop me and tried to apologize. I held my hand up to let her know to shut up. I put a ring on your finger over 6 years ago, promising to forsake all others for you. I tried my best to be a great husband and to be your friend and your life partner, but you were never interested, were you? You betrayed everything I held sacred and dear, and that can never be replaced. Goodbye and good riddance. Wait, please. I will do anything for you to take me back. Even arrange a threesome between you, Nancy, and I if you want. She pleaded with me. The look of disgust I threw at her before I turned to walk away broke her down, and she just sat down and cried. As I walked away, I wondered why all of a sudden she was so interested in getting back with me, but quickly pushed it from my mind. Who gave a damn anyway? Too little too late as far as I was concerned. Before I turned the corner, I heard her shout to me, "Believe it or not, I did fall in love with you, and I am truly sorry for the hurt I caused you." I continued walking because it was too little too late as far as I was concerned. I designed and had my company build me my dream home after that, and settled down to live my life as a bachelor. I did hear that Kathy and Nancy broke up in less than a month, but who cares? My life is in front of me, and I will not be looking back to the past anymore.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.